So, good afternoon. I'm in a different location today because on Mondays I work in the shed. I have a fleece on because it's flipping freezing. And I need to talk to you about this book here, IVON, by Michael Alywin. Now, this is an awesome book and you have to read it. So that's out there already. Many reasons I loved it, one of which I'm a massive cricket fan. And there's some wonderful jokes around cricket in there. It's a book, the idea of the book, it's a dystopian future where power, energy has become such a scarce resource that human beings now create their own energy through exertion, and that power is kept to the grid, as it were. I'm not going to say any more because it's wonderfully original and you really need to kind of read that. I don't want to spoil it because it's so unusual, and that's really powerful, I think, when you read something that you've never read before, you've never imagined you would read before. It's really worth a read. I also loved because Mr. Average is Welsh and we have strong Welsh connections, and there's an important part about the sort of nature of the conflict between England and Wales, which is our entire house, of course, because I'm from England. So it's just such a powerful book for me personally to have read. I'm looking at it now. The cover's amazing, I think. So it's fabulous and you absolutely have to read it, and I need people to read it because it's the sort of book you want to talk about. However, there is one very, very small caveat. I actually threw this book across the room when I read the last page. It is not an ending that I liked. Shall I put it that? Is that diplomatic? It's not for me, the ending. And I was so cross because I'd loved it up until that last page. I did actually throw the book away. But that passion that it invokes, I think, is a good thing. I would advise you not to read the last page and to just make up your own ending. It gets quite dark, which I had not really seen coming, because I actually found it had quite a lot of humour and quite a lot of the idea that the Welsh are this kind of a primitive. Oh, it's just hilarious. It's wonderful. But for me, the ending was not as I would have wished it. That doesn't mean it's not entirely correct, and probably very fitting, and probably what would have happened to that individual. It was just too much for me. I just couldn't cope with it very well. However, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't, and that doesn't mean that I don't need to give myself a good talking to. But the fact that I felt so strongly about it tells me that it's a book worth reading, because we don't always get that feedback, do we? Sometimes we get to the end and go, not what I would have done. But this really made me feel very strongly. I want you to read it so that I can talk about it with you. It's really unusual. It's really well written. It's very clever. It takes you to a place that's just so ridiculous, but yet completely believable and complete. I could completely imagine how we would get ourselves to that place in the future, and once I'd got my head in that space, it takes a while for you to understand what it is that's happening. And I loved all the different characters' responses to this idea that the kind of mental adaptations genetically that have been made, where you take people from such a young age and give them this set of rules to live by, and when they see people not living to those rules, how distressing that would be. I think when the woman goes to the rugby match, the proper rugby match, and I've been there and I've done that in Wales, and it's the most extraordinarily power. I mean, talk about harnessing energy and power. Go to watch rugby in Wales. And her distress at seeing that unleashing of passion, it is really, really clever and really thoughtful. And then now when I see things like that, I mean, the Six Nations is on at the minute, and my husband, the England match, we have to obviously tread around each other very carefully, but the Wales the first match, I mean, he could have generated our entire town probably from the power that exuded during the passion of watching that, and the yelling and the shouting and the clapping. And I think now I've been opened my eyes to this idea that actually we create power. I kind of feel like I want to attach Mr. Average to a generator, you know, and harness that, because he probably could power our house. And that's just the Six Nations, you know, don't add in football or anything else. Our children could probably power, you know, a significant amount of our energy needs. So it's this future that feels so completely weird, but by the end of the book, you're like, you know what, I think that might be an idea. I think that might be a thing. I really enjoyed it. I can't tell you how fun it was to read, how clever it was, how much it made me think. Just rip out the last page before you start, and you're good. You're good to go. It's called IVON. It's by Michael Alywin, and you have to read it. It's just brilliant.